You've heard the phrase, the burden of command. You think you understand it. You don't. This isn't a story about glory. It's not about the medal they pinned on my chest while my hands were still shaking. It's about the moment when a 22-year-old sergeant with dirt under her nails and a broken watch looked at me and said, "Sir, if we push that button, my little brother dies. He's in a blast radius. He doesn't even know I'm here." It's about the 3 days I spent trying to find a third option when the world gave me two: kill millions or let millions be killed. And it's about the decision I made that no one will ever know about. Not the real one. You want a war story? Fine. But I'm warning you now. The hero isn't who you think it is. And the ending? I still dream about it every single night. Buckle up. This one's a bastard. The first time I saw the target package, I threw up in a sandbag latrine. That's not an exaggeration for dramatic effect. I actually did it. My knees hit the plywood floor, and my brain decided that the half-digested MRE beef stew needed to make a reappearance. Corporal Diaz heard me through the canvas flap and asked if I'd finally caught whatever stomach bug was going around the FOB. I told him yes. Elite. The truth was too big to fit in my mouth. I'm Captain Elena Vasquez, and 3 months ago, I was an intelligence officer attached to a joint special operations task force in a country we're not supposed to name. The war had been grinding on for 11 years. 2 generations had grown up knowing nothing but drones, checkpoints, and the low thrum of helicopters in the dark. We'd stopped calling it a conflict and started calling it the situation because that sounded less permanent, less like a tombstone. But then something changed. The other side, let's call them a collective because that's what their translated propaganda called them, had finally done something stupid or brilliant, depending on your definition of those words. They'd consolidated their entire high command into a single underground bunker complex. Not a backup location, not a distributed network. All of them. Generals, strategic planners, the spiritual leader they called the Voice, and what our analysts believed was a significant portion of their long-range missile command staff. 437 high-value targets, give or take a few aides and bodyguards. The bunker was buried under a mountain in a densely populated valley. Above it sat a city of 3 million people. Mothers, children, old men playing chess in the square, teenagers selling bootleg DVDs from carts. Real people with real names and real teeth and real problems that had nothing to do with the war except that they were born on the wrong patch of dirt. The bunker had been designed by Soviet engineers in the 1980s. Our best geologists and weapons analysts had run the models. To penetrate deep enough to guarantee a kill on the primary targets, we need a GBU-57. That's a 30,000-pound bunker buster. Massive. Impressive. And when it hits, it doesn't just explode. It creates a seismic shockwave that travels laterally through the bedrock. The models were unambiguous. A successful strike would collapse approximately 2 square miles of the city above. Not from the blast itself. The mountain would absorb most of that, but from the ground liquefaction. Buildings would sink. Sewers would rupture. Fires would start from ruptured gas lines. Estimated civilian casualties, 1.2 to 1.7 million in the first 72 hours. Another 800,000 from secondary effects over the following 6 months. But the war would end. The collective's leadership would be decapitated in a single moment. Their missile forces would lose strategic direction. Their regional allies would scramble for new partners. Our intelligence suggested the remaining command structure would fragment into warlord-led factions within weeks, and we could negotiate separate peace treaties with each. One strike, end the war. Key million. That was the math. General Morrison handed me the folder at 0600 on a Tuesday. He was a lean man with shotgun pellet scars across his left cheek from an IED that had killed his driver 3 years ago. He didn't sugarcoat things. He didn't need to. "Captain," he said, "you're going to read this, and then you're going to tell me if there's any way to do this with fewer than 1 million dead." I opened the folder. I read the executive summary. I threw up. When I came back, wiping my mouth with the back of my hand, Morrison was still standing there. He handed me a canteen. "Drink," he said. "Then, get your team together. You have 72 hours to find me a miracle." "Sir," I said, "I'm intel. I analyze. I don't do miracles." He looked at me with something that might have been pity or might have been exhaustion. "You do now." My team was waiting in the TOC, Tactical Operations Center, when I walked in. 5 people who had somehow become my responsibility over the 18 months we'd been deployed together. Staff Sergeant Marcus Webb, our senior NCO, was 42 years old and had been in the Army since before I started middle school. He had a salt and pepper beard that he maintained with religious precision and a habit of calling me ma'am in a tone that could mean anything from genuine respect to gentle mockery. He was reading a worn paperback copy of 100 Years of Solitude and looked up when I entered. "You look like hell, ma'am." "Thanks, Marcus." Sergeant First Class Tanya Petrov was our signals intercept specialist. She'd been born in Kiev, immigrated with her family when she was 12, and joined the Army to pay for college. She had a temper like a fireworks factory and the patience of a saint when it came to untangling encrypted communications. She was drinking coffee from a mug that said, "I'm not yelling, I'm Ukrainian." "What's in the folder?" she asked. "Nightmare fuel," I said. Corporal David Diaz was our youngest at 22. He joined straight out of high school from a small town in New Mexico where his family had run an auto repair shop for 3 generations. He was the team's drone operator and had the kind of spatial intelligence that made him see 3-dimensional problems the way the rest of us see flat pictures. He was also the most relentlessly optimistic person I'd ever met. It was annoying and necessary in equal measure. "Is it the kind of nightmare fuel where we get to blow something up?" he asked. "The opposite," I said. Specialist Maya Hassan was our cultural liaison. She'd been born in the country we were operating in, adopted by an American family after her parents were killed in the early years of the war. She spoke 3 local dialects fluently and could read a room full of hostile elders faster than I could read a PowerPoint slide. She was quiet, observant, and had a dry wit that only came out when you least expected it. "If you're making that face," Maya said, "it means civilians are involved." "A lot of them," I said. And then there was Lieutenant Jamal Carter, my deputy. He was 31, a West Point graduate, and the most by-the-book officer I'd ever served with. We clashed constantly. I was intuitive, he was procedural, but I trusted him with my life. He was already standing by the map table, arms crossed, waiting. "Close the door," I said. They closed the door. I laid out the folder contents across the table. Satellite imagery, geological surveys, population density maps, the weapons effect models. I didn't soften it. I didn't summarize. I read them the entire package, including the casualty estimates, because they deserved to know exactly what we were being asked to do. When I finished, the room was silent except for the hum of the servers and the distant crump of artillery somewhere to the north. Diaz spoke first. That's a city. That's not a target. That's a whole city." "Yes," I said. "We can't do that," he said. "I mean, we physically can. We have a weapon. But we can't, right? That's not a thing we do." Marcus closed his book. He did it slowly, marking his page with a torn piece of map grid. "It's been done before," he said quietly. "Dresden, Hiroshima, Tokyo. The math doesn't care about our feelings." "That was different," Petrov said. "Was it?" Marcus asked. "They had their reasons too. End the war faster. Save lives in the long run. It's always the same argument." "We're not having this argument yet," I said. "We have 72 hours to find another way. General Morrison didn't ask us if we should do it. He asked us if we could do it with fewer casualties. That's our mission. Find a way to hit that bunker without killing 1,000,000 people." Carter unfolded his arms. "What if we can't?" "Then we tell him that," I said, "and then he takes it up the chain, and someone in Washington makes a decision that will haunt them for the rest of their lives. But it won't be our decision. Our job is to give them better options. So let's get to work." We worked for 18 hours straight. I don't remember most of it, just the glow of computer screens, the smell of cold coffee, and the way the light through the sandbagged windows shifted from gray to brown to black. Petrov pulled every signal intercept from the past 6 months, looking for patterns in the collective's communications that might indicate a secondary command location. Nothing. They were all in the bunker. All of them. Diaz flew simulated drone missions over the valley, mapping every possible ingress route for a ground team. The mountain was a fortress. Cliffs, minefields, thermal sensors, and at least 2 battalions of infantry in the surrounding hills. A special operations raid would cost dozens of our own people and still probably fail. Maya called every local contact she had, asking indirect questions about underground construction, recent digging, anything that might suggest the bunker had an alternate exit. The answers were vague or useless or both. Marcus and Carter argued about weapon alternatives. A smaller bunker buster wouldn't penetrate deep enough. A series of precision strikes on a mountain face might create a collapse without the seismic shockwave, but the models were inconclusive. We needed a geologist. A real one, not just the Army's computer simulations. At 0200, I sent everyone to sleep except Maya, who was still on the phone with a cousin of a cousin who knew someone who'd worked on the bunker's original construction. I sat in the corner with my head in my hands and tried not to think about 1.2 million dead. I failed. The next morning, everything changed. Diaz burst into the TOC at 0630 with a tablet in his hand, and a look on his face that I'd never seen before. It was a mix of terror and excitement, like a kid who just found a rattlesnake in his backpack. "Ma'am," he said, "you need to see this." He pulled up a thermal overlay of the mountain. The bunker was a dark rectangle of cooler earth, surrounded by the warmer signature of the surrounding rock. But there was something else. A thin line of cooler temperature, barely visible, running from the eastern edge of the bunker and extending approximately 800 meters to the north. "That's a ventilation shaft," Diaz said. "Or maybe an emergency exit. The Soviets always built those. They're paranoid about entrapment. Why haven't we seen it before?" I asked. "Because it's dormant. No airflow, no thermal signature." But last night, there was a power fluctuation in the valley, probably a grid overload from all the air conditioning they're running to keep the bunker livable. The emergency backup kicked in for about 45 seconds, just long enough for the shaft's ventilation fans to spin up and cool the surrounding rock. I stared at the image. A shaft, 800 meters long, possibly an exit. "If we can get a team into that shaft," I said slowly, "we could place a smaller charge. Something that would collapse the bunker without the seismic effect on the city." "That's the idea," Diaz said. "But, ma'am, look at the diameter." He zoomed in. The shaft was narrow. Very narrow. I did some quick math in my head. 60 centimeters, I said. 58, Diaz corrected. A person could fit. Barely. No gear. No weapons bigger than a sidearm. And they'd have to crawl. For 800 meters? In the dark. With no guarantee that the other end isn't guarded. And the shaft is probably rigged with sensors. They'd have maybe 15 minutes before the collective realized someone was inside. I looked at the map. At the shaft. At the city of 3 million people sleeping above it. "Get the team together," I said. "We need to find someone small enough to fit." We didn't find someone. We found two someones. Diaz himself was 5'4" and 130 pounds. He could fit. And Petrov, when she volunteered, was 5'2" and built like a distance runner. They were the only two on the entire FOB who could squeeze through 58 centimeters of rock and concrete. "Absolutely not," I said when they both stood in front of me. "I'm not sending two of my people into a glorified coffin." "Ma'am," Diaz said, "I'm the only one who knows how to place the charge to cause a directional collapse. And Tanya is the only one who can bypass the sensors fast enough to give us a window. You need both of us. Then we find another way." "There is no other way," Petrov said. "You know that. We've been over every option. Either we drop the big bomb and kill 1 million people, or we send us and kill 437 bad guys and maybe no civilians." "That's not a hard choice, Captain." "It's a hard choice for me," I said. Marcus put a hand on my shoulder. It was the first time he'd ever touched me without permission. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "they're soldiers. This is what they signed up for. Let them do their jobs." I looked at Diaz. He was 22 years old. He had a girlfriend back in New Mexico who sent him care packages full of green chili and handwritten letters in purple ink. He'd shown me a picture once. She was pretty. She had braces in the photo and was making a silly face. I looked at Petrov. She had a mother in Chicago who called every Sunday and made her promise to be careful. She had a younger brother named Alexei who was 16 and wanted to join the Marines because he thought his sister was the coolest person alive. "You have 48 hours to train," I said. "Then we go. And if either of you dies in that shaft, I will personally resurrect you and kill you again for putting me through this." Diaz grinned. "That's the spirit, ma'am." Petrov just nodded. But I saw her hands shaking. The next 48 hours were a blur of planning, rehearsals, and arguments. Carter wanted to call in airstrikes to suppress the mountain's defenders. Maya insisted that any local guide would be a liability. Too much risk of betrayal. Marcus worked on the exfiltration plan, which basically amounted to run like hell and hope the helicopters are on time. And I sat in my cot every night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was sending 2 kids to their deaths to save my own conscience. Because that's what it came down to. I couldn't live with 1,000,000 dead. So I was willing to gamble with 2 lives instead. Was that courage, or was that cowardice dressed up in leadership clothes? I didn't have an answer. On the 3rd day, at 0400, we launched the operation. The night was cold and clear, which was bad for stealth, but good for helicopter pilots. I rode in the command bird with Marcus and Carter, listening to the rotor's beat time against the dark. Below us, the valley spread out like a rumpled blanket, scattered with the dim lights of villages and the occasional flicker of a campfire. Diaz and Petrov were in the insertion bird ahead of us, along with a 4-man fire team from Delta who'd been assigned to secure the shaft's entrance. The Delta guys were professionals, quiet, efficient, and utterly unreadable behind their night vision goggles. One of them, a staff sergeant with a neck like a tree trunk, had looked at Diaz and Petrov and said, "You two are either very brave or very stupid." "Both," Diaz had replied. "Definitely both." The landing zone was a small clearing 2 kilometers from the shaft surface exit. We'd chosen it because the ground was relatively flat and the tree cover would hide the helicopters from the collective's radar. The moment we touched down, the Delta team disappeared into the tree lean like ghosts. Diaz and Petrov followed, carrying backpacks that held the explosives, the sensor bypass kit, and enough water and protein bars for 12 hours underground. I stayed with Marcus and Carter at the command post, a shallow depression behind a rock outcropping, with a satellite uplink and enough batteries to power a small hospital. My job was to coordinate, to listen, to make decisions based on fragmentary information from people I couldn't see. I hated it. "Alpha Team, this is Victor Actual," I said into the radio. "Status." The Delta team leader's voice crackled back. "Victor Actual, Alpha. Approaching objective. No contacts yet. Out." I waited. 30 seconds. A minute. 2 minutes. "Alpha, Victor. Update. Victor, Alpha. We're at the shaft entrance. It's concealed under a false rock formation. Confirmed the thermal signature matches the satellite imagery. Sending Diaz and Petrov in now." My heart started doing something unpleasant in my chest. "Copy. Keep me informed." Marcus handed me a canteen. "Drink," he said. "You're no good to them dehydrated." I drank. It tasted like warm plastic and regret. The next hour was the longest of my life. Diaz and Petrov crawled through 58 centimeters of darkness, 800 meters into the mountain. Their headlamps were covered with red filters to minimize light signature. Their radio signals were weak, bouncing off the rock walls and coming out garbled. I caught fragments, sensor at 200 meters and Petrov bypassing, and Diaz here moving, but nothing coherent. At the 45-minute mark, Petrov's voice came through clear for the first time. "Victor, Petrov, we're at the inner access hatch. It's locked. Electronic keypad. Can you bypass it?" I asked. "Give me 5 minutes." She did it in 3. I heard the click of the hatch opening, then Diaz's whispered, "Holy shit." "What?" I said. "What is it?" "Ma'am," Diaz said, "this isn't a bunker. It's a palace. We're looking at marble floors. Chandeliers. I think that's a Persian rug." I exchanged a glance with Marcus. The collective's leadership had been living in luxury while their soldiers fought and died in muddy trenches. It shouldn't have surprised me. It still made me want to throw up again. "Forget the decor," I said. "Find a primary target area and place the charge." "Moving," Diaz said. They crept through the bunker's corridors, guided by the thermal maps we'd built from satellite data. The place was huge. Multiple levels, conference rooms, sleeping quarters, a command center with banks of computers, and maps covering the walls. And people. Dozens of people, maybe hundreds, moving through the halls in the soft glow of emergency lighting. Diaz's breathing was loud in my ear. Petrov's was almost silent. I imagined them pressing themselves into alcoves, ducking behind doorways, holding their breath as guards passed within feet of their position. At the 90-minute mark, Diaz whispered, "I see the primary target area. A conference room. Big table. Maybe 30 people inside." I recognized the voice from the intel photos. He's at the head of the table. Can you place the charge? I asked. There's a structural support pillar in the hallway outside the room. If I put it there, the collapse will be directional. It'll bring down the ceiling on the conference room and the surrounding offices, but the rest of the bunker might stay intact. The models are fuzzy, ma'am. Best guess, 80% of the primary targets are killed. But there's a 20% chance the whole bunker collapses. And if that happens, the seismic effect, I finished. The city. Yes, ma'am. I closed my eyes. 80%. 437 targets, 80% killed. That was 350 dead. The remaining 87 would survive, probably including some of the collective's most important strategic planners. The war wouldn't end. It would just get nastier, but the city would survive. Place the charge, I said. Then get out of there. Copy, Diaz said. Placing now. I heard the soft beep of the explosives arming sequence. Petrov's voice, counting down the timer. Then, gunfire. Not on the radio. In the bunker. Muffled by rock and distance but unmistakable. The sharp crack of an AK-47, then another, then a burst of automatic fire. Diaz. Petrov. I shouted into the radio. What's happening? Static. Then Petrov's voice, strained and gasping. Victor, we've been made. Guard patrol, turn the corner. Diaz is hit. My blood turned to ice. How bad? Arm grazed. He's still moving. I'm covering the retreat. We need extraction. Now. Alpha team. I called. The shaft entrance. Diaz and Petrov are coming out hot. They have hostiles behind them. The Delta team leader's voice was calm, almost bored. Victor, Alpha. We hear gunfire. Moving to secure the exit. Out. I stood up. Marcus grabbed my arm. Where are you going? To the shaft entrance. Man, no. That's 2 kilometers through hostile territory. I don't care. Ido. Marcus's grip tightened. You're the mission commander. If you get killed, there's no one to call in the extraction helicopters. You stay here. You trust your people. That's the job. He was right. I hated that he was right. I sat back down and listened to my people die. The gunfire continued for another 4 minutes. Then it stopped. The radio was silent. I keyed the mic every 30 seconds, calling Diaz's name, Petrov's name, Alpha Team's frequency. Nothing. Carter was already on the satellite phone with the air component, scrambling the extraction helicopters early. I don't care about the mission clock, he was saying. I have friendlies in contact. Get the birds in the air now. Maya was crying silently, tears cutting tracks through the dust on her cheeks. She wasn't making any noise, just sitting against a rock, arms wrapped around her knees, staring at nothing. And then, Victor, Alpha, we have them. The Delta team leader's voice. Flat. Professional. But underneath it, something else. Relief? Exhaustion? I couldn't tell. Status? I asked. Diaz has a through on his left arm. Petrov has a cracked rib, took a rifle butt to the chest during the fight. Both walking. Both talking. We're exfiltrating to the LZ now. Ow. I sat down. Hard. Marcus caught me before I hit the ground. See, he said. Trust. I'm going to kill them, I said. When they get back, I'm going to kill them myself for scaring me like that. Yes, ma'am. I'll hold them down for you. The helicopters landed 20 minutes later. Diaz and Petrov were loaded onto the medevac bird, both of them pale, but conscious. Diaz gave me a weak thumbs up with his good arm. Petrov just closed her eyes and leaned her head against the cabin wall. I climbed into the command bird with Marcus and Carter. The rotors spun up. The ground fell away. The charge. I asked. Set for 0600, Diaz said over the intercom. We have 3 hours. Did you confirm a placement? Yes, ma'am. It's on the pillar. Directional blast. The models say 80%. And the other 20%. Diaz was quiet for a moment. The whole mountain comes down. The city goes with it. I looked out the window at the valley below. 3 million people sleeping in their beds, unaware that a 22-year-old corporal from New Mexico had just placed a bomb under their feet. We need to evacuate the city, I said. Carter shook his head. We can't. The collective would know something was wrong. They'd scatter. We'd lose the targets and still have 1 million civilians in the blast zone if the charge fails. Then we warn them anonymously. Leak it to local media. And if they don't believe it, or if they believe it and panic, and the collective uses the chaos to escape. Carter's voice was tight. Elena, I know you want to save everyone, but we're past that. We're in damage control now. Damage control, I repeated. That's what we're calling it. That's what it is. The helicopter banked toward the FOB. Below us, the valley grew smaller and smaller until it was just a dark shape against the lighter darkness of the surrounding hills. I made a decision in that moment. Not the one I'd been ordered to make. Not the one my team expected. I made my own. Change of plans, I said. We're not going back to the FOB. Take us to the airfield. I need a plane. Marcus stared at me. Mom. I'm going to the source, I said. I'm going to talk to the voice. That's insane, Carter said. Probably. But it's the only way to save the city without losing the targets. You can't just walk into an enemy bunker and negotiate. Watch me. The helicopter landed at the airfield at 0315. I commandeered a liaison plane, a small twin prop that was used for courier runs between forward bases, and filed a flight plan that took me to a neutral country 3 hours away. From there, I'd cross into collective territory by land, using a false identity that Maya had helped me create months ago for exactly this kind of contingency. You're not going alone, Marcus said. He was standing on the tarmac, arms crossed, blocking the plane's door. I'm not taking you into a war zone, Marcus. You have a family. So do you. My family is the Army. And right now, my family needs someone to stay here and keep things from falling apart if I don't come back. Marcus stared at me for a long moment. Then he stepped aside. You're the dumbest smart person I've ever met, he said. I love you too, I said. And then I climbed into the plane and flew into the dark. The neutral country was called something forgettable, a former Soviet republic with a name that sounded like a sneeze. I landed at a small regional airport at 0700 local time, filed false paperwork, and walked out into a world that didn't know or care that a war was about to end in fire or mercy. Maya's contact met me in the parking lot. He was a thin man with a gray beard and eyes that seen too much. He didn't introduce himself. He just said, "You're the American," and opened the door of a battered Toyota sedan. I'm the American, I agreed. The drive to the collective's border took 4 hours. The man didn't speak. Neither did I. I spent the time reviewing everything I knew about the voice, his biography, his speeches, his psychological profile. He was 63 years old, a former professor of Islamic history who'd radicalized after his son was killed by a drone strike in the war's 4th year. He was charismatic, intelligent, and utterly convinced of his own righteousness. He believed that martyrdom was the highest form of worship, both for himself and for the millions he was willing to sacrifice. But he wasn't stupid, and he wasn't irrational. Those were my only hopes. The border crossing was a formality. The collective's guards were young and nervous, their fingers hovering over triggers. I showed them the forged documents, spoke the phrase Maya had taught me, and was waved through with barely a glance. 2 hours later, I was standing outside the mountain. The bunker's surface entrance was hidden in a ravine, guarded by a platoon of soldiers in mismatched uniforms. They looked tired, hungry. The war had been hard on everyone. I need to speak to the voice, I said in my best local dialect. I have information about an attack on this facility. It will happen in less than 2 hours. The guard captain laughed. Many people claim to have information. Most of them are liars or madmen. I'm neither, I said. And if you don't let me in, you'll be dead before sunset. Something in my face must have convinced him. He made a phone call. 5 minutes later, I was being led through the shaft, the same shaft Diaz and Petrov had crawled through hours earlier. I walked upright because the shaft was wider here near the entrance. But I still felt the weight of the mountain above me, pressing down like a hand on my chest. The bunker was exactly as Diaz had described. Marble floors, chandeliers, Persian rugs, and the smell, expensive coffee, incense, and underneath it all, the faint metallic tang of fear. The voice received me in a small room off the main conference area. It was sparsely furnished. A desk, 2 chairs, a bookshelf filled with religious texts. He was shorter than I expected, with a neat gray beard and kind eyes. He looked like a grandfather. He looked like a man who had never ordered anyone's death. Captain Vasquez, he said in perfect English. I know who you are. I know why you're here. And I know about the bomb your people placed in my hallway. I sat down across from him. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. Then, you know you have 90 minutes to evacuate your people, I said. The bomb is directional. It will kill everyone in this room and the surrounding offices. But the rest of the bunker and the city above will survive. If it works as intended, the voice said. Your own models give it a 20% chance of catastrophic failure. A failure that would kill my people and yours. The innocent and the guilty alike. I know, and yet you came here. To warn me. To give me time to escape. To give your people time to escape, I corrected. I don't care if you die, voice. But there are cooks and cleaners and drivers in this bunker. People who didn't choose this war. People who deserve to live. The voice studied me for a long moment. You are either very brave or very foolish. I've been told both. He smiled. It was a sad smile, the kind of parent give the child who doesn't understand why they can't have another cookie. Captain, he said, I cannot evacuate my people. If I do, your military will know that their plan has been compromised. They will drop the larger bomb, the one that will kill the city. I won't let that happen. Can you stop it? You are one officer, far from your chain of command. Your general has a mission. His superiors have given him an order. If I run, they will assume the directional bomb failed and proceed with the secondary plan. I opened my mouth to argue. Then I closed it. He was right. If the voice evacuated, Morrison would assume the worst. He'd launched the GBU-57. The city would die. The only way to prevent that was for the bunker to appear intact until the last possible moment, which meant the voice and his people had to stay. You're going to let yourselves be killed, I said. We are going to accept martyrdom, he corrected. There is a difference. There's no difference. Dead is dead. For the body, perhaps. But the soul, he waved a hand. You don't believe in souls. That's fine. I don't need you to believe. I only need you to understand that I have made my peace with this moment. My only regret is that the war will continue after I am gone. It doesn't have to, I said. Call your commanders. Order a ceasefire. End the war now, and I'll disarm the bomb myself. The voice laughed. It was a genuine laugh, warm and surprised. You would betray your country? I would save 3 million people. My country can court-martial me afterward. He stopped laughing. He looked at me with something like respect. You mean it, he said. I mean it. Then, you are a fool. But you are a noble fool, and in another life, I would have been honored to call you my enemy. He stood up. I stood up. We were the same height, I realized. Two people who had spent their lives preparing for this moment. And now that it was here, neither of us knew what to do. I cannot order a ceasefire, the voice said. My commanders would not obey. They have their own ambitions, their own visions for the war. I am a symbol, not a king. When I die, they will fight over my corpse. Then die somewhere else, I said. Fake your death. Go into hiding. Let the war end naturally. And live with the knowledge that I ran while my people stayed. He shook his head. No, Captain. I have made my choice. Now you must make yours. He pressed a button on his desk. The door opened. 2 guards stepped in, their rifles raised. You will not be harmed, the voice said. You will be escorted to the surface and released. My people will remain here. In 45 minutes, your bomb will detonate. The city will survive. The war will continue. And you will live with the consequences of your mercy. That's not mercy, I said. That's just a different kind of murder. Perhaps. But it is the only kind available to us now. The guards took my arms. I didn't resist. I looked at the voice one last time. You could have saved them, I said. So could you, he replied. They marched me out of the room, through the marble corridors, past the chandeliers and the Persian rugs. I saw the cooks and the cleaners and the drivers going about their business, unaware that they had less than an hour to live. I wanted to scream. I wanted to warn them. But the guards' hands were tight on my arms, and the voice's words were echoing in my head. You will live with the consequences of your mercy. The shaft seemed longer on the way out. Darker, colder. I felt the mountain pressing down, waiting to collapse, waiting to kill. They released me at the surface. The guard captain didn't speak. He just pointed toward the border and turned away. I walked. I walked for 10 minutes, 20, 30. My legs moved automatically. My brain was frozen, stuck on a loop of the voice's face, the cook's faces, the faces of 3 million people sleeping above a bomb that might or might not work. At 0558, 2 minutes before detonation, I stopped walking. I took out my satellite phone. I called Marcus. Ma'am, he said. Where are you? I'm in the valley, I said. Near the mountain. Marcus, the voice refused to evacuate. The bomb is going to detonate in 2 minutes. I need you to do something for me. Anything. Call General Morrison. Tell him the directional bomb is in place and the primary targets are confirmed in the kill zone. Tell him I gave the order to proceed. You didn't give that order. I did. What? I gave the order, ma'am. 30 minutes ago, when we lost contact with you. I assumed you were dead. I didn't want your last act to be hesitation. I closed my eyes. Marcus. I know, ma'am. I'll take the court-martial. It was my call. No, I said. It was mine. And I'm about to make it worse. I hung up. I turned around. I walked back toward the mountain. The bomb detonated at 0600 exactly. I was close enough to feel the ground shudder. Close enough to see the dust plume rise from the ravine. Close enough to hear the rumble of collapsing rock. The groan of a mountain eating itself alive. The directional blast worked. The bunker collapsed inward, killing everyone inside. The seismic shockwave was contained. The city above barely felt a tremor. 3 million people woke up that morning and went about their lives, never knowing how close they'd come to death. And I stood in the dust and the silence and the falling ash, and I did something I hadn't done since I was a child. I wept. Marcus found me an hour later. He'd hitched a ride on a medevac helicopter that was supposed to be evacuating wounded from a skirmish 10 clicks north. He landed in the ravine, walked through the settling dust, and sat down next to me without saying a word. We stayed like that for a long time. 2 soldiers sitting in the shadow of a tomb, waiting for the world to tell them what came next. The war isn't over, Marcus finally said. I know. The collective second-in-command is already issuing statements. He's blaming us for the Voice's death, calling for revenge. I know. We killed 437 people. Most of them were bad. Some of them probably weren't. And the war is still going. I looked at him. His face was streaked with dust and exhaustion, but his eyes were clear. He was waiting for me to say something wise, something that would make sense of the senseless. I didn't have anything wise. Marcus, I said, I went back. Back where? To the mountain. Right before the bomb went off. I went back. He stared at me. Why? I don't know. I thought I could stop it. Or warn them. Or die with them. I don't know what I thought. I just know that I walked back, and then the bomb went off, and I was still outside. I was alive. And they weren't. Marcus put his arm around my shoulders. It was the second time he'd touched me without permission. I leaned into it. You're going to carry this for the rest of your life, he said. I know. And you're going to tell yourself that you could have done something different. That if you'd been smarter, or faster, or braver, you could have saved them. I know that too. Good. He squeezed my shoulder. Then, you're already ahead of most of us. The helicopter came back for us at noon. I climbed aboard, strapped myself into a seat that still had blood on the harness from the previous passenger, and watched the mountain shrink behind us. The war lasted another 4 years. We never got another chance like that one. The collective rebuilt their command structure, learned from their mistakes, and made sure they were never all in one place again. I was court-martialed for leaving my post without authorization. The charges were reduced to a reprimand after Marcus and Carter and the rest of the team testified that I'd acted in what I believed to be the best interest of civilian lives. I was given a desk job in Virginia and told to keep my mouth shut about the whole thing. I didn't keep my mouth shut. I wrote this instead. People ask me sometimes if I regret it, if I wish I'd done something different. I tell them the truth. I regret everything. And I regret nothing. But here's the part I've never told anyone. The part that keeps me awake at night. The Voice was wrong about one thing. The bomb didn't kill everyone in the bunker. 3 people survived, a cook, a janitor, and a young communications officer who'd been in a supply closet when the ceiling came down. They were rescued by a collective search team 3 days later. The communications officer was interviewed by a journalist 6 months after that. She described hearing footsteps in the hallway seconds before the explosion. Footsteps that didn't belong to anyone in the bunker. Footsteps that stopped outside the supply closet door. And then a voice, a woman's voice, saying something in English. She couldn't remember the exact words, but she thought it was something like, I'm sorry. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if I said anything. I don't even know if I was really there. But every night when I close my eyes, I see that door. I hear my own voice. And I wonder what would have happened if I'd opened it. The hero of this story isn't me. It's the 22-year-old corporal who crawled through 58 centimeters of darkness with a bomb on his back and a grin on his face. It's the Ukrainian-American sergeant who took a rifle butt to the chest and kept covering the retreat. It's the old NCO who held me together when I was falling apart. They're the ones who saved the city. I just stood in the dust and cried. But here's the thing about war stories. They're never really over. They just change shape. They become dreams. They become scars. They become the reason you wake up at 3 in the morning and check your phone for messages from people who've been dead for years. The bomb worked. The city survived. The war kept going. And I'm still walking back toward the mountain. Every single night.